Hello, this is Dr. Prashant Muthukrishnan. This is a video that gives you a preliminary introduction to the PowerPoint presentation or the slides that I'm sharing with you. And this will be a 1 to 2 minute presentation just as a teaser so that you can understand my slides. And I have a much more detailed video link following this, and that'll be a detailed presentation. So I start off with basically sharing my aims to work with you on sharing this questionnaire of phenotype analysis amongst cohorts within pulmonary medicine, and we're doing this as part of ATS Integrative Therapies Assembly or Group. And I go on to explain the fundamental constitution of the human organ systems based off the 5 elements of nature that have permutation combinations to form vata, pitta, and kapha. And each of these 3 systems functions as different entities within our body, including the neurotransmission, hormonal balance, as well as structure and lubrication. And these are actually very similar to other systems, including Roman, Greek, Chinese systems of medicine. And we already understand in behavioral medicine, we use temperaments such as choleric, melancholic, and so on. And then I go on to share with you the actual dosha calculator or the phenotype analysis. And you can pause the video or I'll share the slides with you. And you can always go on to my main video so that you can spend more time in detail understanding the actual questionnaire. And I go on to tell you as to why the environment or the universe around us has everything to do with the same set of vata, pitta, and kapha. These 3 machineries that run within our body is the same phenomenon that's running out in the environment, and that's why we need to pay attention to what's going on around us to keep a balance or keep health. And this will be part 2 of the questionnaire that you'll be using for your patients as part of the research project. And I'm hoping that we not only understand the baseline phenotype of patients, but also understand the current symptomatology for these patients and try to figure out which of these 3 systems is actually out of sync or dysregulated. Whether is it vata that's out of sync, or is it pitta that's dysregulated, or is it kapha, or is it more than one? And the reason is that these systems have a lot to do with the biological clock and circadian rhythm. And when we don't pay attention to the circadian rhythm, that's when we have diseases or symptoms. And these are analyses that are not restricted to just phenotype, but also all the way down to the genotype. And they've identified 52 SNPs that showed significant difference between these 3 constitutions, and also epigenetic proportions there. And I go on to tell you examples of vata predominant people, pitta predominant people, kapha predominant people, and you'll understand more about who you are, and so that you can apply this to your own life first, so that this makes sense for you. Specific types of food constitution that are important for specific types of people. And this goes down to, again, carbohydrate predominant, protein predominant, fat predominant foods versus elemental constitutions that make a food sweet versus bitter. For example, citric acid or certain acid derivatives is what makes certain foods pungent, right? And therefore, trying to oppose your nature with the type of foods that you eat is something important. And I'm using this as a segue towards drug development projects with you. And you can take this to the next level where you work with things including curcumin extract or ashwagandha. That's an example of a plant product that's becoming very famous and being used a lot. And I'll show you just a quick example of how many of our drugs actually come from plant products, right? For example, digoxin, right? That's something that you recognize. Paclitaxel, atropine, right? Caffeine, camphor, cocaine, codeine, colchicine, curcumin, L-dopa, digoxin, right? Irinotecan, so many um, cancer drugs, and so on, right? So this is an example for you to just understand that this is not just for phenotype analysis, but going to the next level where we use certain plant products that are used commonly for these phenotypes according to Ayurveda, and you can classify your severe asthma cohorts or your pulmonary hypertension cohort or ILD cohorts based on these three phenotypes. Where are the neurotransmitter predominant dysfunction, or the hormonal enzymatic activity dysfunction, or are they structure and lubrication predominant dysfunction? Accordingly, give them their do's and don'ts, lifestyle modifications, as well as plant products. And then go on to the next phase, talk to your pharmaceutical companies and figure out what are the other molecules that are worth studying, right? Including things like licorice and so on. Daily routines and Ritacharya, which is seasonal routines, are very important lifestyle modifications, or understanding your daily activities. And you can pause the video and look at this more in detail, because most importantly, I'll talk to you about parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system function as a component of vata, and how it affects your motility. I presented this in ATS in 2020, where I studied stool patterns and tried to correlate them with severity of asthma symptoms, where the extremes of stool patterns had more to do with more severe asthmatics, and gives a sense of the level of dysregulation in their IBS symptoms, which we know. And we know that Ayurveda describes, and many other systems, including Chinese medicine and Roman Greek medicine, understands that the gut is the source of, or the starting point of, all forms of insult that happens to our human body from the environment, or the activities that we do, or from the epigenetic influences, and then they move on to other organs from there on, including gynecological diseases that we see in correlation with asthma. Example, endometriosis, gallbladder disease in patients who are also having disease including asthma, or mucus predominant asthma as against dry asthma. These are some of the examples. And there is a very nice study in the Blue Journal and American Thoracic Society publications that looked at understanding asthmatics and giving them these formulations, as well as 5 different list of activities to do, and plant products. And this shows beautifully the before treatment and after treatment of a single arm study, but still very sound technique, not just looking at respiratory function, but also all the way down to the cytokine inflammatory cascade, dropping the levels of Th2, Th1, and improving levels of immunosuppressive, and also eosinophils and IgE, as you see there on the left side, right? And then I go on to tell you more about how specific markers of LDL cholesterol metabolism have a lot to do with your VPK and these phenotypes, and so many different functions within the human organ systems correlate with specific phenotypes of these patients that we know. This is another example of a phenotype analysis questionnaire that's available online. I give you some examples of certain foods that are favorable for certain phenotypes. I've also published a case report to give you an example of how this is done. And we know that the microbiome acts as a middleman between the influence from the environment or the activities that we do and the symptoms that we experience, because these microbiome colonies are the ones that are actually facing the dysregulation from the circadian rhythm, and therefore transmit all these chemical neurotransmitters when they release these. Serotonin and all these neurotransmitters actually come from the GI system rather than from the central nervous system completely. and therefore it's important that we pay attention to these microbiome colonies and do certain things, ingest certain things, or avoid ingesting certain things that are not favorable for our phenotype, right? So I'm trying to go beyond just calling an asthmatic based on eosinophils or allergic and so on, and or calling an ILD patient based on just connective tissue disease, because rheumatoid arthritis may be a connective tissue disease that you may have, but the ILD that you have goes more deep down into the roots of what type of activities that you do, what kind of epigenetic influences have you gotten from your parents, and these things will help a long way in drug development, as I've hinted to you. So we can combine this with lifestyle medicine concepts, including the famous 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, American Board of Lifestyle Medicine, and I've just gotten certified also in ABLM. I'm a diplomat of ABLM. Okay, so I hope you will join me in this opportunity to share phenotype analysis within your cohort of interest, and I hope this will support ongoing on future drug development strategies. Thank you very much.